evening, folks, and welcome to FMA Discussion. This is episode 459, and today we have Guru Kurt Cornwell from Michigan, Detroit, actually, just outside, 1 mile outside that city, that Motor City. So we'll find out all about Detroit. But anyway, yeah, so we're going to be bringing him on. If you have questions, please put them on the right-hand side. I will get to them as I see them. If they're not pertinent to what we're talking about, I will kind of wait and to try to and put them where it's more relevant and that. And what other news? Stick around the end. Raffle. We got some sick folks in the Philippines, masters and all that. And we're running a raffle, and it looks like it's going to be March 17th, if I'm not mistaken. So look for that flyer, which is going to be posted next week with all the directions, ticket sales, where you can pay. Also, if you look, there's already some items there that folks are donating for the raffle items. So check those out. Some good stuff in there. Some lessons. I think there was a stick bag, if I'm not mistaken. And believe it or not, there was a Piper DVD there. How interesting. So without further ado, here is Guru Kurt. Hey, how are you?
Hey, good. How you doing?
So do you like my intro to regarding
Yeah,
Detroit?
that was fun. It's fun
I'm
to
sure
watch
you
the
never
video.
heard the
Yeah,
Motor
right. Yeah,
City
yeah,
before.
yeah.
I'm sure that's new, right?
Uh-huh. Yeah, our reputation precedes it.
So, let's kick off. Before we get into the meat and potatoes, FMA and your school and all that good stuff and what you're doing there, what was your training prior to FMA?
So I've been around martial art my whole life. My dad was a judo guy through college and did some boxing and stuff growing up, like a lot of people from his generation did. And so I was always around it. He started teaching me judo. I was about 5, 6 years old. He and I would do like, the best karate books, like that old series. We did a lot of stuff like in my basement with that, a lot of like kind of charming memories of taping out lines to do the kata on the floor and that kind of stuff. And but he was a legit judo competitor, and so I grew up around that. And then by the time I was about 14, I got really into and started Aikido. And so that was my first real formal training. Growing up in the 80s and 90s, Seagal was, one of those big action heroes that we all were looked up to. So there was a place not too far from home. So started with that in Iaido. But I did really like a buffet style thing through all of my teenage years into my early 20s. So, I spent time training Hung Gar, Tai Chi, capoeira quite a bit, and some like small circle jiu-jitsu, that kind of stuff. So real mixed bag along the way.
Nice, nice. So how did you get initially exposed to FMA?
Sure. So it was at a place called Tracker School. It's in
Tractor School.
Yeah, it's in New Jersey. It's founded by a gentleman named Tom Brown Jr. And he was and still is, a sort of a survivalist teacher. And this was
Tom
back,
Brown.
yeah, Tom Brown, yeah.
Oh yeah, oh
Yeah,
yeah.
so I was a student at his school, flying back and forth to New Jersey to the Pine Barrens. And my father he was a big an inspiration in my life, was also and is still an avid outdoorsman. So that was a big thing when I was about 19, I think 19, 20. I started going to Tracker School. And along the way, they had a course called the Scout Protector program. It still exists and is run now by a gentleman named Christopher Harley, who's part of the Inosano family and a dear friend of mine, is a big brother of mine. And he was one of the teachers at that time. It was run at that time, really by a handful of people. George and Vanessa from the MKG family were the heads of that. A gentleman named Paul Bonner, who's in Canada, who's a really phenomenal old school talent. There's just a lot of people that were there that were teaching this program. Essentially what it was they were kind of combining martial art with what they call scout skills. So survival skills, fast pace, tracking, counter tracking, surveillance and counter surveillance, that kind of stuff, mostly in a wilderness setting. And the martial art elements were Filipino martial art, Jeet Kune Do, Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, and Muay Thai. and that was the first time I had done any of those arts, and immediately fell in love. It was
Mhm.
I to this day I think a lot of people have this experience, at least in my from the folks I've talked to. The first time I did Heaven 6, like a Sinawali pattern, I immediately was like, okay, this is what I've been looking for my whole life. This is that
Yeah.
stuff I see in movies. This is so cool. And so yeah, a huge element of it was FMA, and I just never stopped from that point on. That was 20 years ago this year. So.
Wow, that's around the time when the Seahawks, Atienzas, Tom Brown. I
Yeah.
mean, there's a
Yeah. So
bunch of
matter of
stuff going
fact,
on there.
The Hunted, is that what it is, right? The Hunted.
The
That
Hunted. Yeah.
had that was in theaters when I was there. And so the guys that were the technical advisors for the film from Tracker School were my teachers for the survival stuff.
Yeah.
They had just started to sell the prototypes of the knives that were used in that kind of thing. So that was very, very fresh. Matter of fact, a lot of those guys were really unhappy with the film itself because it's so over the top, and it has real, 80s. Hopefully, you don't mind me saying, but that 80s action vibe, super violent, and so they had some mixed emotions about it. But yeah, that was very fresh at the time.
Yeah, I remember I was with Seahawk then, and it was like it was the thing. Matter of fact, that catapulted them into the
Yes,
ozone layer as far as
absolutely.
popularity.
Yeah.
But it's funny. I thought the movie was the more realistic martial arts movies. I
Yeah,
mean,
I think their concern was over, like, how long are you fighting with your guts in your hands? How long can you keep on going,
yeah. I mean, but I'm talking about on
So
the ground when the arm bar. I mean, I thought there was some,
yeah,
the
the
holding of
elements to
this,
it are
and
amazing.
yeah,
It's for me personally, it's one of my favorites. I absolutely love the movie, but it was
yeah. It's one of those
the
you got to
survival
revisit
features were a
every few
little bit,
years.
yeah, and those guys weren't the martial artists. Those particular guys I'm talking about were the guys teaching tracking and teaching,
Yeah.
smokeless fires and matchless fires and all these things. So it was a little, yeah, I don't know. They probably maybe they had a chip on their shoulder. I'm not
We
sure.
got Norman here. Stormin Norman.
No kidding,
Is Tom
Norman.
Brown still alive?
As far as I know, I've not. Yeah, he must be. I feel like I would know if something had happened. I've not spoke to anybody from there apart from Chris Harley, but I feel like I would know if something had happened.
Yeah, I think we would have heard
Yeah,
something. I think the community as a whole would have heard something
sure,
if he did
sure.
pass.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it's fair to say they had a part of training Tommy Lee Jones for the Hunted. No, wow. I'd like to hear more about that. Um, yeah, that was a big deal. So when you were being exposed to, you know, JKD, FMA, and Muay Thai, what was the FMA style that you were initially exposed to there?
So it was definitely what we would now call MKG method. MKG is Rick Faye's international organization. MKG standing for Minnesota Collie Group, though in this era, MKG just sort of is a standalone title.
Okay.
AT&T, CBS, these things have meaning, but we just think of them as a brand. And so this was kind of a couple generations ago as far as MKG goes. And so it was, Guru Rick's extension of the Inasano Lacosta method. And this is where I first was hearing about those people. I knew Guru Dan from growing up in magazines and films and stuff like that, and was
Yeah.
always, a lifelong fan from in that regard. I was a huge martial art magazine fan as a kid. And people kept talking about, this guy Rick Faye and this guy Dan Inosanto, and kind of put two and two together of, oh, that Dan Inosanto, I know who that is. That's the guy from the magazines, and I
Yeah.
used to have his picture on mine. Well, that's who that is. So it was very much that the PSYOC elements were happening essentially like Tracker School had all these different programs. The one that I was in was a group of martial artists, and then the film had technical advisors from Tracker School, but the martial art came from PSYOC. So there was some crossover, but it's not like we were doing PSYOC there. That would be misrepresentation.
Yeah. 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 It was a select group as far as what schools were getting in there. It wasn't. I mean, it was growing, and there was training groups spreading
Sure.
around. But if there was a significantly established school already, you weren't really seeing it there. Generally speaking, I mean, Harley Elmore brought it into
Right.
Texas, and but so basically though, your exposure, I mean, pretty much Anasano blend, right?
Yes. Yep. And that was that. I mean, it remains sort of that, and the MKG method remain at the core of what I do. I'm fortunate enough to be an instructor in both of those organizations. You know, I've been fortunate enough to meet a bunch of other teachers along the way and get exposed to different styles, but that still kind of is the heart of what I do.
Is the ensemble blend
Yep.
in there. And so here it is, though. You're coming from all these traditional martial arts, Hungar, I mean, Tai Chi, you got judo and this and that. And now you're being exposed, these weapon arts. I mean,
Hmm.
like, what, like,
That's the coolest
what
day
stood
ever, isn't
out?
it? You know, it's the coolest day ever when somebody says, "Here, you know, take a stick or take a knife
You
or
gotta
take
take a
one of these."
weapon and start
Yeah.
swinging around. So what resonated with you, like, right off the bat?
That's a good question. I think what did and what still does is the nature of the movement, the fluidity of the movement, the
Mm,
quality of the movement, and the emphasis on quality of movement, right? And it differs from, you know, traditional Japanese or Chinese styles in at least my exposure to them, in the sense of it's not about like a rigid attachment to a certain type of movement, but there's a interesting combination between moving for a functional purpose, right? Real
mm,
intentional movements. And you're talking now about a razor's edge with this weapon. If you're just a little bit wrong, that's it. And if you're just a little bit right, you just got away with it. And so there you have to have that emphasis on the quality of movement, that awareness of your own body, the proprioception between yourself and the ground, that kind of thing is super important. That really grabbed me right away. The flowing nature, again, referencing something like a Heaven Six, the
mm,
ability to kind of cross and uncross through the middle, gunting and those things, that the way that there's this opening and closing quality to it, I thought was interesting. And then it's just immediately like you don't have to look hard to see how practical it is, right? What you're learning, you
yeah,
know, if you're paring and slashing with a knife, you see right away I'm paring and slashing with a knife. I mean, there's no mixing, there's no two ways about it, right? You can tell right away this is what I'm doing. And so some styles, you're some types of martial art, you have to take it on good faith that there is a functional use of that, and that's great, you know. And I had spent some time with some of those things, but this right away was, it just felt more real, you know. It felt like I was really like maturing in martial art right away in that experience of,
yeah.
okay, this is legit, this is for real, you know.
It's funny. I had the same experience. I was in Taekwondo, got my black belt, saw the first UFC. So I went to school around Kozakowski seeking out MMA, but actually ran into FMA and not even knowing that it even existed for that matter.
Mm, sure.
Actually, my first Southeast Asian mart, or well, actually, it was Kun Tao,
Oh
actually. And
wow.
then from Kun Tao, then I kind of segue into, FMA. But I just remember the first thing ever, the first weapon thing I ever did was I was doing a makeup class, and I never went back to MMA. I mean, I did it, but just with a group of guys as opposed to
uh,
like, but with sticky knife and Kun Tao,
huh.
and I was hooked. I was done.
Yeah.
I was just like I could connect the dots, even though I didn't thoroughly understand the system yet or that, but I was able to. Where Taekwondo, it always, I guess I didn't ask the right questions, but I'm like, okay, we're doing forms, but when we do sparring, none of this is
Right.
actually. And
Happening.
and I understood obviously, the whole system and methodology of
Sure.
Taekwondo. But there it was just like, oh wow, there's like I'm seeing the dots connected. Like we're not doing something over here that's completely different from there. And then Ron was also under Vunak and Larry Hartzell.
Sure.
And so I remember first doing Hoovit and I was lost.
uh,
Like I don't know if it was just a bad day. I don't know if things up here just weren't like firing correctly.
well, and that's
I
like, you know, Kuban in particular is one of my favorite things in the whole world.
I
And
was just like,
yeah,
wait,
it's
this,
that
this.
Ponatukin, all of that stuff is among my favorite things in the whole world of martial art. And it's one of the things that as soon as I saw it, as soon as I tried, matter of fact, at tracker school, we did a lot of Ponatukin because MKG has a ton of Ponatukin
Ton of the,
as
yeah,
part of it.
yeah.
And um, I remember thinking this probably is my favorite thing that I've ever done, but I'm terrible at it. Like it was such a huge learning curve. It took me forever to get comfortable with it, but it resonated with me immediately. And our group, Rick Fay was a traveling assistant of Paul Vunak for a long time, and those guys were old friends.
Oh,
So
I
it
didn't
was
know that.
yeah, so it was a huge influence in our,
Interesting.
the methodology and then me personally too. So.
Here's a question for you, because since we're on the Pontucan, was your Pontucan more from the like in other words, the way it was explained to me when I went through the JKD ranks, got my Asano, got the you get the dual certification. You get your
Mm-hmm.
JKD and you get your your Kali
Yep.
certification. And what came through me was it was pretty much the reference was constantly La Costa. Okay, so a lot of this is from the MDN, which is La Costa. Was that your journey as well, or was there separate Pontucan from other systems?
So from an MKG perspective, the best way I can say this, and it's really I think to Rick's credit, is the way we were always taught with Rick Fay was we get this from Dan and Asano, right? That we get this from Guru Dan. Now, if you go talk to him, you're gonna get other answers and all these different things. But Rick has always been very honest and very genuine about, I could maybe cite all these different people, but I didn't train with all of them, So my exposure to this really is just from Dan and Asano. And so almost like not my story to tell kind of dynamic, if you will, that kind of vibe. And so, we didn't get a lot of the details of source material for that reason. It was an intentional choice, more that this is Guru Asano's, what he teaches for as far as Pontucan goes. And I think there was certainly a very long period of time, it's probably still true, that as far as seminar teaching, the MKG headquarters, Minnesota Collar Group, was the only place or one of the only places that Guru Dan was teaching 2 seminars a year. So we had
I heard that.
And then probably the majority of what we would do was Pontucan, because that group has always really been kind of infatuated with it. And so it really was just, to us, was in Asano Pontucan, and really, to be honest, Rick Fay's Pontucan, because he is such a talent and such a guidepost for that particular art. I think he's excelled as much or more than anyone with it. That's my take. That it just was kind of an MKG thing. It's just kind of what the Collar Group did. It's what we were all about, was calling Pontucan and the other things as well. But it was a big core part of what we always had going on. Now, since then, I train a couple times a year, once a year, with Mark Stewart, who also does Pontucan, and that's from like Lukai. And so I've had exposure to some of these other branches of the tree along the way. But yeah, to that question, we always just kind of cite Guru Dan. Now, I am the guy that at the seminar is writing down every other name, and I like those historical notes.
I did too. Like, I wanted to know. Like, I would ask Ron, like, okay, where's that come from? And I wasn't trying to be a pain. I generally wanted to know, where did that piece come from?
Yeah.
And La Costa, that just came up a lot. And Rick Fay is probably smart. Dan.
Right. Right. Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, he's extremely diplomatic, but he's also, I think there's a lot of wisdom in some of those little things that he does.
That's right. Yeah. And, I mean, politics, I'm sure, would create that wisdom,
Yes, absolutely. And so I think in a large part, to an attempt to stay away from some of that stuff. But yeah, I'm like that. I'm always fascinated of, like, I really would like to spend some time in my life training like Flora Villabrea's method in isolation, so that I can then look at the combination of things and go, oh, damn, that's where that part came from. And, even Illustrissimo, from that matter, which I know we're going to talk about, some of these other styles where I'm like, oh, it's fascinating to have spent the bulk of my time with a mixed method, and then later see the original ingredients and kind of get a deeper sense of what it is I've been doing. I think it's a good path.
That's funny, because you know what you just spoke on, that's what I did. Like, I got so immersed in it, and I was so genuinely curious. I wanted to see it all, because, okay, the blend. So right there, like, I was able to decipher, like, okay, well, there's different systems in here. Then I started to find out the different system. Then I just went hog wild. I just started doing, like, just because I wasn't intentionally bouncing around, which it gave me, though, it was very helpful when I started doing these interviews, because I had some knowledge. Oh, I mean, like, as far as what systems, and somebody was basically just bull crapping or whatever.
Right.
Um, but yeah, and I think it is very beneficial. Like once you get that core, where now you go specifically really seeking out some specific arts of that blend that
Right.
really resonated with you. I think that I totally agree with you. I highly recommend that to anybody who's doing
Yeah.
that.
To this day, I'm that same way. If I'm out somewhere and, training or whatever, teaching somewhere, and somebody does, oh, I'm from, Kabbalah Sarada or something, like, oh, awesome. Okay, good. Show me everything, show me two things, show me
Yeah.
one, like just always trying to get those little details. But I think of it, again, citing Rick Fay. One thing that Rick always says is that he sees himself as, and I love this, by the way, I feel this kind of the same way about myself, sees himself as the high school teacher of the JKD community. And what he means is like, what I want to give you is a really solid general education. I want to give you a really
Mm.
healthy foundation in all of the arts and sciences and maths and all that stuff, right? And then from there, I encourage you now go to college and pick your major, right? Now that you've been exposed to all this, go find the thing. What's the thing
I
that
can dig that.
resonated
I like
with
the
you?
analogy.
Yeah, dig deep into that. And so that's kind of always been my process. That's why I moved to Minneapolis to train with him, because of that mentality and because of the culture of his gym in that way. It's what I wanted here in Detroit, and we didn't have it. So I'm like, okay, then I'll bring it here. I'll go
Then
get it.
you'll create it, right?
Yeah. So, but I think that's a great method. Most art works that way, right? So I play
Yeah.
music, not well, but I've played music for a long time. And, if you learn to play an instrument, you learn to play the instrument, and then you figure out what's the genre of music you really like to play or
Right. Where you want to go.
right?
Okay. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's even in my classes, that's how I present the material is I'm teaching you about martial artistry as a whole, and then you're going to find your lane.
Yeah. And then when you go on your further in your journey, you can kind of
Yeah.
pick and go deeper. That's
And
kind of
also
like
I
it.
think helps to negate a lot of the, whether it's the politics or that tricky mindset the ego gets sucked into, that kind of dualistic thing of like, I've always done one way and so that's the best way, where I think if I'm exposing students and we're exposing people to the spectrum of training, then when they do pick a lane, they have a healthy perspective on that. They're like, I can see how
Yeah.
this relates to the other things, and I can
Yeah.
see the validity in context of all these different styles of martial art or styles of FMA, as opposed to being kind of wed to any one thought process.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And not only that, I mean, because without being exposed, they're not going to be able to pick anyhow. Like if they don't
Yeah,
even like,
right,
if even without the exposure.
right.
I want to jump back to Pontotoc, and this has always been my feeling when I was playing around that heavily in the early 2000s. I found it helped to have a decent, I'm not saying excellent, but a decent Western boxing background. Do you agree?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Because it is an extension off of Western boxing, or I don't know, amalgam or something. You know what I mean? It's. I think if you're not understanding Western boxing, then my perspective at least, then you're probably not quite understanding Panantukan, and that might be a differentiation between other more traditional Filipino empty hand styles, right? That might be one of the things that kind of makes it its own lane.
I just think also I think you're going to have difficulty pulling any of it off.
Oh, of
Like
course.
if you don't, yeah,
Yeah.
if you don't just have basic boxing and range
Yeah.
discipline, and it's
Yeah.
going to be tough. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
I mean, I love Silat. I teach Silat. It's a part of what I do. I love it. I have wonderful Silat teachers
same
who I'm
here.
blessed
Yeah.
to know, but I always like to tease my Silat friends of like, this would be even better if it had boxing in it. Guess what? We already have that. It's called Panatukan. Like it's just
Yeah.
those adding those
Think
elements
about it.
into
You
it.
sweep somebody, you take them down, you off balance them. What do you do? You're going to go to hitting.
Yeah, exactly. And that's always the simplest
Yeah.
solution. It's the more natural one. And, one thing I used to do for years here in teaching was teach, excuse me, Panatukan, and we would add like do some Western boxing as a component of it. In the last couple of years, what we switched is really emphasized more on boxing or striking as a topic, and then included Panatukan elements,
I
dirty
think that's the
boxing
way to
elements.
go, to be
And
honest
I'll
with
tell you
you.
from a commercial perspective, it's been much
Yeah.
more viable, but I can connect the dots for people much easier. They're going like,
Totally.
oh, like if I can catch a jab, if I can slip, and if I slip, now I can hit them in the arm. Oh, that's a clever shot, as opposed to just seeing that as like the end all be all kind of thing. They just
Not
seem to
that
inspire it
though.
better.
If you never like threw hands or never
Yeah,
had any hand work, and now your first exposure is Pontoocing, and now you're getting into limb destruction, you're getting
right,
into goontings, and you haven't even thrown a jab.
right.
Like to me, the precursor should be like, here's the basic
Yes.
5 punches. I'm
Yeah.
going to give you first some basic defense. This is going to make a hell of a lot more sense now.
Yes, right. And
You
it's one
know.
of the reasons I like as a name for it, dirty boxing, is because it has that word right in there. You know what I mean? And so even though it maybe isn't always the most accurate, this, that, or the other thing, but it does imply a sense that this is rooted in boxing. This is combining
Mm,
knife fighting elements and Western boxing, and there you have it. And it then becomes easy to again to connect those dots. If I have a lot of students that love Pontoocing and don't do a lot of striking otherwise, and that's great because they love it. It's cool. I mean, it's a fun
mm,
art. It's undeniably cinematic. I mean, we see it more and more in movies. Hell, we see some of these limb striking and what we might otherwise call trapping more and more in combat sports now. So everything
yeah.
has its time. But yeah, if somebody wants to be quote unquote functional with it, I think definitely doing putting in the hard work of just boxing pad work, really making sure that that's at the heart of it, and then everything
Yeah.
else is the things that make it even more special.
Dirty boxing, man. Danny Sullivan, man. You
Yes, right.
freaking
Yeah,
he,
yeah.
he freaking cashed in on that.
I know. Yeah.
I'm just I'm just saying hello to folks here, which I've neglected. We got Eric O'Brien, Norman Taylor, we got Phil, Dana, and we
Hey,
got
everybody.
80 Montreal from Montreal. Minnow, all right. And we got Lewis Bowers is also there, and Terry Guru Terry. We got Maestro Alvin. We got little Chad. Yes, Chad this weekend, absolutely. And we got my man Brian Canada
Hey,
and
everybody.
Alvin. I don't use the term dirty boxing. Yeah, politics.
Yeah,
You
and I know,
might.
Alvin, I know a lot of people don't. And that's why I was just saying, with
Mm,
recognition of the fact that not everybody does, or that maybe there's also perhaps more traditional methods or methods that come more directly from the Philippines, and that might be different, or use different names, mano mano, all these different things. So,
mm,
but yeah, I think our expression of that, for want of a better word, definitely
yeah,
is a kind of a street boxing type of thing.
yeah, it's definitely. I mean, but yeah, I mean, but
And
mostly
it
we both agree
it suits
having
the
a
Detroit mindset well, right?
yeah. Oh my God,
Detroit
yeah.
is a
And by the
boxing
way,
town.
folks, a mile down
Yeah.
the road, you might just have to
Yeah.
use this.
Detroit's a boxing town. I mean, I live 8 miles right outside my house. It's a boxing town, and adding elements that have a bit of grit and have a little more overt violence
Oh my
into
God,
boxing.
Detroit, man, you got the Kronk Gym,
Yes,
freaking
exactly.
notorious,
Yeah,
known for their right hands, man. The Kronk
absolutely.
Gym.
Yeah.
I mean, so, but here's a question before we go into the compare and contrast of KI, your
Sure.
PTK, and ensemble. And um, for all world defense, and I was kind of a late bloomer in this, as far as I guess realizing this, and that more and more I'm beginning more and more I'm appreciating C-Lot, not from the like entirety, but really knowing what to extract from a defensive purpose, blending it with striking, and all that. What's your feeling on the C lot for like just some good self defense on haymakers and the
Sure.
and levers and etc.
I mean, self-defense is a slippery slope, right? I think we could have a 2-hour conversation about how do we define what self-defense means. But I think as far as just taking a generic look at it, I mean, the old adage is true. It's how you train, right? I mean, that's true for Pontoocing as well. I spent with my training partner Stefan, who kind of helps run the MKG headquarters now. Stefan Ruby, he's an amazing sort of unknown quantity in the martial art world. But we spent countless hours putting the bicep pads on, putting the chest protectors on, you know what I mean, and really ripping those things, really smashing the limbs and smashing the hands up. And when you train it that way, you go, okay, this does work. You know, if you're not doing it that way, is it going to be available to you under the stress and duress of you know, a violent encounter? I don't know. That's person to person, right? So can CLOT be practical, functional, useful in that way? Of course, I think there's elements of every martial art that can be. I
Yeah,
think
yeah, no, I totally
when
agree
you're,
with you. You know,
yeah, and I
just
think when
happened
you're
to hear
looking at,
Lindo C-Lot training.
yeah, the nature of off balancing, the awareness and sensitivity of alignment, of understanding how to control somebody else's balance, right? You know,
Mm.
we always say in our classes, like chess, not checkers, right? So trying to, you know, having an actually educated approach to this sort of physical interaction, understanding where the levers are, how the body moves, what pressure does, having some big destructive responses to big punches, definitely can come in handy. You know, in an
Yeah.
era now where, you know, one thing is different now than even 20 years ago, is the average person walking around might have more training or exposure or experience with fighting because of the MMA era, right? So even
Oh,
if
and
they never
YouTube.
trained, they know what a rear naked choke is, they know what an armbar is. So there's
Yeah,
a,
YouTube.
yep, for sure. So the zeitgeist has changed a little bit, and so if you've
Yeah.
got somebody throwing quick hands, you know, it again, it helps to have that boxing background and then be able to implement your CLOT
Yeah,
stuff.
you gotta have
Yeah,
hand work, man. Yeah, you
yeah.
gotta have hand. Yeah.
But you know, I mean, for me, one of the things I love most about it, you know, and so done spend time with Muffalindo, all these different styles, and then SSBD over the last maybe 8 years. Been fortunate enough to get to know Mal Morning really well. One of the things I love about his art is, and I love this about Filipino martial art as well. It's one of my favorite elements, is the idea of like, if you're going from point A to point B, take something with you, right? My
Mm.
analogy is always like, if I'm going on a road trip from here to there, stop at every little tourist attraction along the way, the biggest ball of yarn, the big, you know, whatever it is.
Mm.
And so if you're going to switch to the other side, or you're going to move through to do something else, cut something, hit something, you
Yeah.
know, don't leave any, don't waste any movement. And I think if you can take that idea and that mindset and make that functional in the way that you train, there's really something big there, because it's just a mass attack, you know. But it certainly
Yeah.
depends on the individual, the instruction, the environment, that kind of thing.
Yeah, what they right, and what was instilled in them are the focal points. All right, so after your initial ensemble blend, Rick Fay, you dabbled in PTK and been
Hmm.
dabbling in KI. Is that correct?
Right. Yep.
Right.
Yeah. So we had a gentleman named Michael Melia, was a Pakiti Tersha group leader, out of the MKG, out of the Minnesota Color Group, and then later transitioned into SIOC. And that would have been like, I don't know, 2009, 10, somewhere in there, 11. And
Mhm.
so I trained with Guru Michael out, phenomenal guy. And he was part of MKG, but he sort of had his own separate training group that he did those things in. And so I had exposure through that. And then, and Pakiti Tersha, you know, Rick trained with Leo Gahe, and obviously Pakiti Tersha sort of folded into the Inosanto method, and so as well,
Yeah.
it's a huge part of the MKG method. Bill McGrath has been a regular teacher with the MKG family for a long time, and so
Oh,
I've
really?
learned,
Okay. Oh, I
yeah,
didn't know that.
yeah,
Oh,
he and
good.
Rick go way
Okay.
back, and so that's a huge part of the MKG method, is that branch of Pakiti.
PTI is okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so, you know, I've been fortunate enough to train with Bill McGrath a few times, and speak with him from time to time. He's a phenomenal guy. And
Mm.
then I trained privately with Leo Gahe a couple times. Had a really awesome opportunity to do so here in Michigan while he was here teaching seminars. So spent a little time with him one on one, and with Mel Tortal at a couple different training events.
Mm.
Who I
He's
really
such a
enjoy
good
training with.
guy.
Yeah,
He's
his
such a
movement
good
is
guy.
beautiful. Yeah, really great guy.
He
Really great
really,
guy.
really, really
Yeah.
is. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I liked training with him a lot. He was
Yeah.
really friendly and gracious with me, and you know what I mean.
Yeah.
Knew that I was teaching and would offer me some extra details, some things to keep in mind, and really great guy.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, so that's always been a big part of the melt
It's a
like,
huge part of the ensemble blend. I
for
mean,
sure.
it's
Yeah, yeah,
yeah. I mean, it's you know, it's there. KI.
yeah.
So yeah. So KI. I'm a rep for Brandon and Burton, and but you know, I definitely want to get more in the Yulee track now that things are hopefully slowing down.
Sure.
So it sounds like your exposure first came through the lens of Guro, right?
Yeah. So my teacher is a gentleman named Fred Biliardi, who is he really only sees he trains friends mostly, and so he had some guys he trained Pikiti Tersha with over the years with another guy that's in town. There was some kind of whatever politics stuff with those guys, and so some of them broke away and just did their own low key training group.
Mm.
And Fred was and is, you know, like probably the most talented guy from that particular school, and is just he's the best swordsman that I've ever personally spent time with. And he's super talented, very legit. He's a Detroit firefighter. He's really kind of keeps himself, just does his work, teaches a couple people here and there. And so I got introduced to him by a couple of his guys. One of them is a guy named Ken LaFleur, who's the local Dog Brothers guy here in Michigan, in our metro area. And then Eric Greenberg, and Eric Greenberg was my one of my closest friends and training partners, and he and I have hosted Jay Pugao for, you know, the Science Cell Corticadena. We hosted SSBD together, all the seminars with Maul. So we kind of do some event stuff together. Okay. And those guys introduced me to Fred. So I first trained it once with him, but then really my first in-depth training was Arnold Narzo and Peachy Barone teaching a seminar here. They were here for like a better part of a week, actually. It was like 5 days, something like that.
That was some years back.
Yeah, it's 2013, 2014.
Yeah.
And it was cool. We did a lot of like outdoor park stuff and Eric's backyard, and, you know, barbecued and trained. And it was such a like kind of joyful time, really. It was really something. And I remember saying to Fred, probably the second day of training, like, I just fell in love with FMA all over again. It felt like finding it for the first time again.
Yeah. No argument here.
And Fred trained under Tony Diego and Ming Romy. Spent a lot of time with Ming Romy, and then we like we said before, Tom Daitang in Canada as well. So those guys all know him well, and he's
been on the radar, man. This is a guy. And just what's his name? I'm sorry, his name again?
Fred Biliardi. He'll probably be annoyed with me that I'm talking about him.
I was gonna say, because he's done a good job staying on the radar, because I've never.
He really is, and he's the like most like unassuming, kindest, warmest person. You know what I mean? He's not like he's, you know, one of these guys who like, I only see my super secret ninja tactical friends or something. You know what I mean? He's a super down to earth, extremely pleasant person. And then you put a training sword in his hand, you watch him move, and it's like, oh, okay, wow, you know, he just turns into a panther or something. It's really something. So yeah, he travels a lot. You know, he's done a lot of the traditional Indian martial art, a lot of Silat. You know, he goes to the Philippines, goes to Indonesia. He and his wife every year take a big trip. So he does a lot of like training, traveling, doing a lot of just kind of low key one-on-one.
I can't believe I've never heard of him before. You know, pretty much in the KI community. So what? When you first saw that, you know, what stood out about KI that maybe that you didn't see in the other arts, or something that just resonated with you or stood out?
Sure. And I have a specific answer for that. I did see it in other arts, but the way it was expressed in KI felt very unique, and it's efficiency, right? I'm very fascinated by efficiency. When it comes to movement, you know, finding the most, you know, effective route from point A to point B. For me, so much of that actually comes through JKD, and it's a thing that's a huge part of the MKG method.
A lot of parallel between JKD and KI.
I right away, and the JKD people will kill me for it, but I was like, Kali Silvestrissimo is as or more JKD than JKD. I mean, it really is.
Find ways of attacks. FMA had them long before JKD.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the centerline orientation and the way that you're moving through the middle in that way, I thought, man, and JKD and trapping in particular is just something that I really love. And I said, this feels like that. The sensitivity to pressure, the way you're using the side of the blade to curl and change and manipulate the pressure and momentum like that. This is almost like Chisao, but you're interacting with a weapon, with a sword, and it blew me away, and it just opened something up. And to this day, it's the thing I love most about it.
Yeah, it's my favorite art. I mean, that and Lameko, I would bet you, but Lameko is heavily 40%. Lameko is
and
KI.
that's a Lameko is again one of those things I would love to spend more time just isolating that element and understanding it better.
Yeah, it's so, I tell you, it just doesn't get, like, in my opinion, it doesn't get enough due. But
right.
But yeah, KI though, I totally agree. When I got Mark White's book in the late '90s, like, I remember there were two people that stood in that book when I was going through it. Whether the context of what I read or just looking at them, I don't know, or a combination thereof. But it was Edgar and Tatum. Those two, just like Edgar, the JKD of freaking FMA, putting all the system together.
Right.
And then Elisimo, reading that at 16, taking somebody's head off. I'm like,
yeah,
that guy, whatever he's doing, man. And then seeing him move on YouTube, I was like, but there was nobody in the East Coast. Couldn't find anybody. There was just nobody. And so I had to go through Abenir
right now to see it come out so much.
Yeah, it really.
It's I've not been around long enough to say it's never gotten its due. I'm 41. I haven't been around that long. But in my time with these arts, to see it really start to be in the forefront. I mean, I felt like there was a period of time when I started, I talked to a lot of people and they're like, oh, what's that? Like, they never heard of it. And now it's really become a household name.
Well, it was so Manila based. I mean, and then, when Brandon's father moved to San Diego, okay, he started, he had his faction there, but it didn't really grow outside of San Diego, and no fault of anybody. It just, but now Brandon is definitely making a concerted effort to bring it to the forefront. Yuli all of a sudden is flying the KI flag and not just the Baja Cebu. Burton coming out with his thing. So I think it's healthy. I think this is what's going to raise the art up,
Yeah. And I don't know if there's, every martial art style and family has its politics and stuff, but I'm grateful for this time period to get the different perspectives because there's no way I get to train with Tateng, so to be able, if 5 different people did, some of them for years, some of them for smaller amounts of time, if we can listen and take all their feedback and their notes, you get some approximation or assimilation of what that was like. And with a healthy awareness that it's not the exact same thing, but like with Guru Fred, with my teacher, so much of the training is what Guru Burton calls ambush style training, right? And so it really was, he's so phenomenal, and it's just kind of pick it up and let's go, dude, here, and he's just feeding and smashing, and I walk away from those experiences, especially in the beginning, walked away from those experiences going, I know my body learned a lot, I got a lot of my muscle memory. There's no way I could go and write this down or let alone teach it. You know what I mean? There's nothing that felt like there was a lot of structure to it, because that's not how he was taught. And so he's trying to give me the experience and exposure that he was given. And I'm super grateful for that, especially as I try to carry this forward for Detroit as something that people can learn. So I'm grateful to almost like an old school style of training, but it's nice to then have someone like Bert Richardson come around and go, okay, here's a list of things. Here's something cohesive. Here's some good note-taking skill that I have.
It was well done. It was well orchestrated.
Very well organized. And for my brain, I really benefit from that. Even if I don't train or teach that way, having a reference to go, okay, I've got something I can hang in my mind now. It's been super helpful.
Yeah. I thought he did 2 genius things in this program when I was there. One, in other words, if you look at when KR folks spar, you don't see a lot of for instance, Friday, Media Friday, Salok, I mean, even Crusada sometimes and all that. And I think Burton did something incredible by forcing that to come out through the ambush, because that's when a lot of that stuff is coming. Your sword's down, you're in this, here. I mean, boom, Friday. You know what I mean? So I thought that was incredible how he did that. The other thing, from the different positions.
Yes.
Your typical number 5, your Abierta, Serrata. But here, I thought those 2 things, I thought he
Yeah,
knocked it
I
out of the park.
grabbed that positional thing immediately, and that's always been a big thing with MKG. Is like, yeah, we have the position you might want to start from, whatever the art or whatever it is we're working on, but you also have to have a very healthy awareness of the fact that not every violent interaction starts that way. Matter of fact, most don't. Right?
Mm,
So if we're in a situation, by the way, we're both like this, we're moving around, probably I'm in some stupid bar fight with some knucklehead. What am I even doing? You know what I mean? Most of the violence happens because I'm looking here, and out of nowhere you get, broadsided like that.
yeah,
You get ambushed, and so only starting from an ideal position as opposed to can you be efficient? Can you have an educated response from every possible variation,
absolutely.
including, lights out and you're laying on your back, right? Now we're
Yeah.
really getting into understanding how to apply these techniques in a certain way. And so, yeah, having that built directly into the techniques themselves is really great.
Yeah, I thought he nailed it. I'm just good. Some folks have jumped in, so I just don't want to be neglectful
For
here.
sure.
We got Eric Greenberg, David Parker. Oh, we got Michael Blackgrave. Simplicity, efficiency. Can't argue that.
Absolutely.
We got Brian and he applied fencing. Yeah.
Hey, Eric Greenberg, I was just talking about you.
Saying bad things.
Yeah.
I see in KI my Wing Chun. Yeah, yeah, the JK. Yeah, and then quote from GM Yuli. KI must be felt to be learned, and it was taught to me and Pilar.
Yeah.
And we got
Yeah,
Dana.
definitely felt to be learned is certainly, that certainly resonates. That's
Yeah.
undeniable. You know, it's an art that you can easily intellectualize because there's so many technical elements,
Conceptually, it's easy. But when
Yeah.
you put real time, real
Yep.
speed, real adversity into the
Yeah.
play, that's
Yeah.
when things, and then you're trying to figure out traction and pagata and where to
Hmm.
be just in the right. Are you
Right. Right.
overcompensating position?
And
Yeah,
that's the whole
that's
thing in the
where,
beginning, just that literal razor's edge of right or wrong. You know what I mean?
yeah.
It's if another thing I really appreciated from Guru Burton's thing is the shoulder position.
Mm,
The significance of left shoulder, left hip, right hip, which is in front, which is back. The relationship between those two gaits is so profound. And it
yeah.
can be the difference between scoring and getting scored on, striking and getting taken down. I mean, it's such a big factor in it, and I really appreciated having that just kind of called what it was. So
Yeah,
yeah,
no. Yeah, he's doing well with it. And,
yeah, it's good.
and I think it's going to, I think he is going to be kind of the initial one who obviously has done it, but I think there's going to be some to follow. I really do. It
Sure.
takes one person to kind of start something, and then
Yeah.
you kind of see the trend in there. So I think
Yeah, and
anyhow.
like one of my very good friends who runs the Cleveland branch of MKG, he's a BJJ black belt under Roy Harris, and so now he's also doing Cullies to the Streets under Roy Harris. And
Because of Roy's under Romeo, right?
yep, and Roy's always been kind of extended MKG family, and he and Rick go way back, and so there's all these little branches of the tree that you
Yeah,
start to find, yeah, people kind of sharing what they've learned.
that's awesome. Wow.
Yeah.
So, when it comes, okay, why, in your opinion, why is JKD and Kylie why do they complement each other so well?
Yeah, I think again the efficiency thing, right? It's escaping me now for some reason. I say it every day at the gym, but Bruce Lee's kind of lying for that. But longest tool to closest target feels very FMA to me. Some of these principles, right? I mean, defanging the snake is interception, in my opinion. Or directa is interception, certainly
Right,
that
yeah.
kind of thing. The understanding of centerline as a theory and as a way to like conceptualize the training. I sometimes it's like JKD might kind of operate through the center line with a Wing Chun base. Maybe Panatukan is sort of bisecting it that way, but there's still an emphasis on that understanding that funnel, right? My body is going to funnel through into the opponent in this way. Um, they both seem to have similar operating systems in that way, right? The range, the emphasis on range, understanding that distance will really dictate what the appropriate tool is. Mixing different arts from different methodologies. I think a lot of Filipino martial art might be like a family system, but in the case of somebody like Tatang, these are things he's learning from different people throughout his life, and making those things his own through real life altercations. And so it's this kind of mixed bag, for want of a better term. There's probably a better way to say that, but JKD is this as well. It's somebody who's doing a lot of research and putting these things together based on what's worked for him. There's a lot of crossover, I think, between Tatang and Bruce Lee as far as that element is concerned. Having Dan Inosanto at the helm for a lot of these things in the West is obviously that naturally those things are going to cross over. But if you do JKD and then you do Panatukan, it's hard to deny that they feel like cousins, even if there is no overt common thread.
Yeah, I wouldn't
they
disagree.
Just mix,
I think they blend well. I think it's like you said, the whole center funnel and all that, but also taking into center mass awareness, as far as targeting, and then kind of fusing the two as far as awareness. But yeah, I agree. As far as Illustrissimo and Bruce, I think both savants in a way, and both fight IQs off the freaking charts.
Absolutely.
Right. And both long arms.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like just physically gifted. Like I always said that physically gifted could just, salto you from like, those poor guys that he was.
Yeah. And and in that regard, it's good for all of us as students, I think, to remember, like with Bruce Lee, I'm never going to be able to do what he did. Right. So I can appreciate and be grateful for the roadmap that he left behind. I'm 6 feet tall, 41, could probably lose a few pounds. I'm not going to be BruceLee anytime soon. It's going to take a time machine and a change of life for that. So but I can still use what he did to my benefit and process because of it. And the same is true with somebody like Tatang. Never could I ever, right, be able to do that. But to have people that have created a roadmap, to have people that want to share it and go, okay, certainly I can do my best to acquire whatever amount of that knowledge I can and make it my own, then we're certainly off to a good start. So.
Yeah. That's all it's the best we can do, right? To be the best version of ourselves. We just got to, take what's afforded to us, right?
Right.
Let me just see here. I just want to make sure I'm not missing comments. When I trained with GM Yuli, we worked live blade a lot. He would say, move or die, and come at you. The learning curve was short, Lone, but you got it quickly. I teach my cane the same way. And bother to do it.
Sure they do. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I go, because I want to, it's funny, I've made a point, just because I have this appreciation for KI. So I've trained like Dave Gould and Mako, try to get his aspect of KI,
cool.
which is unbelievable. A scary individual, far as Prakshonan Bagata. The guy's just, but just because he's under the Mako umbrella, people don't think of him as KI.
Interesting.
And and then Brandon Burton, the little Kuro, but my next stop is Yuli. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I've done some online training with him and all that, but I want to get one of his folks. But so when did you when did you begin to teach?
2010.
So you got ranked up, or you got permission?
Yeah. So under Rick Fay, so I was it was level 1 instructor certification, which is kind of a old school process. Then I actually had a year-long like probationary period. So I had certain things I had to do. I had someone I referenced earlier, Stefan, who was my teacher and training partner. He kind of became almost my sponsor instructor. And so we did a lot of training outside of class and certain like testing and things I had to do in this 12-month period before I would be considered for it. And then MKG has an annual training camp, a summer training camp. At that time, it was at this kind of like, actual camp space out in the woods in northern Wisconsin. It's an incredible place, incredible experience there. So I got my level 1 certification there at that event, which was really cool. It's one one of the biggest days of my life for sure. As you know,
I
we
can
can all relate to
imagine.
that. Yeah.
And that was
So it
and
was,
that was Rick Fay, correct?
yep. Yeah.
Okay.
And then from there, I got my first instructor certificate under Guro in 2013, probably something like that. So, been better part of a decade that I've been with him as well. Um,
So once you got the green light, did you immediately then start teaching or open a
so I started
school?
teaching at Rick's school.
Oh, you
I
was okay. All right.
Yeah, so I was lucky enough to become like a staff instructor there, and we had a trapping program or class that I kind of took over as my pet project because it's the thing I've always really loved. I'm just fascinated by. I think it's really cool. And so I took that over and would teach like his what they call phase one, which is sort of like the core blended method. Just taught various classes, Pontotoc and Kali, that kind of stuff, JKD.
Mm.
Pontotoc and JKD probably always were my the bulk of what I did. And but again, I moved to Minneapolis 2007, 8, just to train with Rick, and because I wanted to bring his dynamic and this sort of democratic mix of martial arts and artists and ideas to Detroit. What I had always kind of dreamed of was finding a place where, like, I just kind of had in my mind, I was like, there's got to be a spot where there's guys just kind of hanging out. One of them does kickboxing, one of them's a
Yeah.
boxer, one of them does ninjutsu, or I don't know, I don't care what it is. And they're all
Right.
kind of sharing their stuff with each other and improving each other.
That would be
And
neat, man. Yeah.
what's that?
That would be neat.
Yeah, and essentially that's what MKG is and was. And so Rick was at the helm and this phenomenal talent at the helm, but it was very much that thing. And he's always to this day soliciting feedback from his students and his instructors, and especially the instructor group. What have you been teaching lately? What works? Have you made any discoveries? Share with the group. How can we continue to keep moving forward? It's this everyone has a place at the table, right? And that mattered to me a lot, and I felt like that was extremely rare in the martial art world, at least where I lived and when I was coming up. And so I packed up everything and moved there just because I wanted to be around that. Stayed there for I don't know, better part of a decade, and finally hit the point where I felt like I was ready to come back home and kind of see that idea through, right? And there was a period of time where I was like, I'm never going to leave. This is amazing,
Yeah,
um,
like yeah. You kind of like find a home. You're
yeah,
comfortable,
absolutely.
and
Yeah. And
yeah.
it's, I mean, even this MKG family and like those people are my
Yeah.
family. And, I've had some of my own family stuff growing up like we all do. And so it was sort of this surrogate family that took me in, and it was very, very profound. But I hit a point of feeling called to move back home. I met my wife through like at the college group at Rick's school. We met in a Thai boxing class, and we started dating. And so am I going to stay there?
Kicking each other's legs off.
What's that?
Kicking each other's legs off.
Yes. There is a story about her kicking me in the groin the first time I met her, but
Oh, by the way, would you like to do something
yes,
after I
exactly.
recuperate from this groin shot?
Yeah, weird sort of love at first sight, but she had her own story and reasons that she was ready to leave Minneapolis, so she decided to come with me. So we said let's do it, let's start an adventure. So yeah, we moved back here 2013 and hit the ground teaching right away.
Oh, wow. So did you sublet or would you do it first?
So I started off doing like free community rooms
All right.
in Midtown Detroit, and then teaching first in Midtown, and then another neighborhood called Corktown, which is the oldest neighborhood in Detroit. It's a historic neighborhood. And one was at a free community room. The Corktown one was at somebody else's just like fitness gym, personal trainer
Mm.
space. And I would start off with 1 day a week, then a couple days a week, a couple classes, whatever per day. We also would do what we jokingly called martial art food truck. So we would just keep a box of gear in the back of my truck and then post on Facebook. This is probably 2014. hey, we're going to be at this park at this time, and we would just kind of show up, and if people would show up, we'd give them some pads and just work them out a little
Well, that's
bit.
awesome. All
Yeah,
right.
people at the park would be like, what's going on over there? They'd walk over and we'd have them try stuff out, that kind of thing. And it was just a real community oriented program.
Mm.
Wound up at meeting a dear friend of mine, Steve Baker, who runs a BJJ school here in the metro area. And he's the first guy who really let me kind of open up shop in his space. So I did mat time from him, I don't know, at least 3 days a week. And that's really where we started kind of putting our roots down, was there. And by 2015 or 16, we made the jump into opening our own spot.
So were you always flying under the flag of Rick Faze?
Yep. So we were at
Okay.
MKG Detroit. Still, my group is still MKG Detroit.
Okay.
Part of our story involves losing everything with COVID, which is a whole story unto itself. But
Not the only one, man, that got rocked, right? Man.
yeah. So we opened. We had one gym. We expanded, got a bigger space. Things were going like this. I mean, I was traveling, teaching seminars, spent some time in Japan with the MKG people, and hang out there. And we started this jiu-jitsu program that was sponsored by a friend of mine, and that was blowing up because in the town that I live in, there's nothing, no jiu-jitsu here. And we just like this, and COVID hit, and in about 6 weeks, bang, it was nothing. And I kind of joked like it took me 35 years of martial art to get there. It took COVID 3 months to
think about that. Took 3 months to freaking crush it, right? I mean, what they say, 30% of the schools got just gone.
Yeah, we didn't really get any. I don't know why we didn't really get any funding, and we didn't get any rent breaks or anything. And so we effectively had a business that was not legal to operate, but we still had to somehow pay the bills. And I'll tell you,
bad deal, man.
It was 3 days after my son was born that the property manager called and said, "Get your stuff out by tomorrow." Yeah, so it was a dark time. It was not.
I can't imagine. Here you are. You put all this hard work, effort, and something you can't even freaking control.
No,
like you have no control in it. You know what I mean?
We were finally breaking through, right? It was just that I'm like.
I mean, I had a group class because, the good thing with me was, the group class ended. I mean, okay, wasn't that upset because it really led to me just doing privates and seminars now, which I'm love. So I'm not going back to the group class. Right. But for folks that had schools, though, such as yourself, I was obviously empathetic when you're seeing these people put their heart and soul and life savings. They built this thing to get crushed because of government sanctions and a virus that
Yeah. And it was such a cool place too. And it was, that gym was awesome, and it was a really special place. So yeah, that was tough. But so we wound up, I had a real short period of kind of feeling bad for myself, and I don't know if I want to keep doing this or whatever. And some neighbors of mine right across the street owned a CrossFit gym, and right before COVID, they'd moved into a really big space. And so they were also trying to survive, and they were like, you know what? Like, we have an extra studio space in there that has all the storefront windows in it. We don't really use it. Why don't you take it over and we kind of work together?
So, that was nice.
Yeah, it was. Changed my whole life. So it took 2 years to the week, almost to the day, but 2 years from the time we started there to kind of grow out of that space and now open our own gym again. So we're back to having our own space. So
things. All right. So everything's good now.
Wood, things are actually better than before, believe it or not. So, I'm very cautiously optimistic. I'm
waiting for that next.
Yeah, and that's kind of my personality. I always feel like waiting for the other shoe to drop. But it's called Boombox, and we actually do like music, and we'll do sometimes live music during classes. We have a yoga class that has live music and singing. We do certainly MKG Detroit is the bulk of everything. But we have there's a gentleman named Armanak who teaches Indian and Iranian martial art and yoga. We have another guy, Tim Clark, who's a good friend of mine. He and I have a nonprofit together. He does his own brand of yoga with live music. We have my old capoeira teacher teaches classes there. One of my students teaches drumming to kids there. So we have all different things like that. So it's like an intersection between different types of art. So the core program is MKG Detroit, but because we had other people take us in and help us kind of incubate, we wanted to make this space where it's a community space where other people can have that
Yeah, like somebody
opportunity.
else went through you, and
Yeah.
and like somebody afforded you the
Yeah, absolutely.
opportunity,
Yeah.
and
So
so now
pay
you're
it
just giving
forward.
back, which is awesome.
Yeah.
Um, so now, all right, so you got obviously you're teaching FMA, you're teaching JKD,
Hmm.
basically the nucleus of MKG. What do you got? Have you actual instructors, and have you graduated some folks yet?
Yeah, a couple people. So it's part of what we're working on right now, actually, and it's part of the 2024 projects ahead of us. Is one of the things we're doing with Boombox is implementing more of what we're calling recreational MMA and being really overt in the sense of we're training mixed martial arts, but what we try to do with our space is very specifically make a space that's accessible to people who otherwise would assume they have no business doing MMA, right? Somebody like me, like an everyday person who they have the image in mind of martial artists, kids in white uniforms and colored belts,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
big giant dudes in a cage beating the life out of each other.
yeah.
Well, what about the rest of us? And so we're trying to take Muay Thai, catch wrestling, all these different things, submission grappling, jiu-jitsu, whatever, and make them accessible to the everyday person, regardless of their
Gotcha.
lifestyle, their background, that kind of thing. So by really calling it recreational, they recognize right away this is sort of like a skill development thing. This is a life skill, and it's a training community. We managed
Mm,
to pull that off with JKD. We managed to pull that off with FMA, which I wasn't sure we'd be able to do. We've got people of every stripe of every flag, and they're smiling, doing knife work together, and it's a kind of a cool thing to see that happen. And then so the next project is trying to accomplish that with MMA as well. So I've got some people that have leveled up that are like staff instructors, and
gotcha.
so they might be more of a kickboxing instructor, they might be more of a collie or scream instructor or whatever, based on what their niche is, but everybody does everything. um, so yeah, we have a few people, but this year we're developing an instructor training program in-house, and then that's kind of their roadmap for the people that want to become MKG instructors. So
Gotcha.
Rick's organization has its whole process that they've built now over the last few years. It's
Yeah.
phenomenal. And so like for me, I became an instructor under Guru Rick, and then it wasn't a stepping stone to being an instructor under Dan and Asano, but it was sort of part of the process towards that,
Sure. Yeah.
right? And so we're
So you
doing the
gotta get
same thing.
recommended, right? You gotta get
Yes,
recommended.
exactly. Yeah. And so
Yeah.
that's kind of the thing, is like, if you want to level up under my teacher, I want to make sure that there's certain things that you're doing here in house. And
Mm,
I want you to have exposure to teaching. And so we need to kind of codify that a little bit and give people the opportunity to do so. And we've got some people, a couple of young people right now it's real exciting to watch. It's one of my like
mm.
new like favorite joyful parts of the art is watching newer younger people discover not just the martial artist that's in them, but the teacher that's in them, which is really really
Yeah.
fun.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, we've got a few people there. I mean, they're proper Detroit kids, and here they are just come out and like being able to communicate this art in a way that's really effective and is passionate, but it's accessible, and it's awesome. So yeah, it's a huge
That
part of what
is.
we're doing.
So how many kids included? How many folks you got now?
It depends. We're probably right now. We've been open since August. Our grand opening was October. We're probably around 50 at the moment, something like that. So it's not huge, we're still in our infancy with this space.
Yeah, but it's, I
But
mean, 50.
a year ago we were still in the process of starting over. I did have, to their credit, about 8 people that stayed with me when everything closed.
Oh,
And
wow, that was
so
nice.
yeah, they're our core team and our leadership team and everything. And and some of them now are instructors and stuff. Some of them been with me since 2013 or 14, 15,
Oh,
whatever,
wow,
been with me for
that's
a
awesome.
while.
It's a long
Yeah,
time. That's great. Yeah.
yeah, but the bulk, we probably got a good 40, 50 new people, so it's been cool. And it's, again, every single, we have probably one of the most like diverse groups of students that you're going to find. And it's a really cool, like cross section of what Metro Detroit is. So
Nice.
that's our mission, is to try to build bridges into the community so that more people started off seeing, in the West, seeing yoga as this kind of strange thing. What are you guys doing? And now yoga studios are
Mm,
everywhere. Ferndale, where I live, has like 8 of them. We're one of them. So
Yeah,
we
yeah.
want to make, martial art more of a household name for adults in Metro Detroit. People, when parents call me for our youth program, what do they always talk about? I want my kid to have confidence, discipline, better listening skills, better social skills, and some abilities to protect themselves.
Some adults can use that.
All of us, right? Find me one that couldn't benefit from that. And in the meantime, like, don't you also want to
Just
defend
check out
yourself?
Facebook.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. Right, yeah, social media is built off of this. So yeah, that's what the algorithm does. So we're
Jeez.
trying to kind of show people like, hey, I always use myself as an example. Like, I mean, martial art is, particularly FMA, is so good for your brain. If you're dealing with things like anxiety or depression or
Mm.
PTSD, this can really be a valuable asset for you. I met my wife through this, which means I have my kids because of this. So this has completely impacted my whole life, and trying to spread that message first. And, that doesn't mean I don't do the more functional stuff. If I have a student who has a direct threat to their safety or their life, then one-on-one, we're going to go to that place. If I'm working with a private security group or law enforcement, which I do sometimes, I have professional experience with that, then we're going to go to that place, very contextual to what that group and that environment is. But our sort of gen ed is more about the lifestyle practice and just,
In the community. And
really a lot of mental health awareness. My wife's a therapist, so there's a lot of that stuff that's kind of injected into what we do.
yeah, if you can help people, man, that are
Yeah, man.
struggling, you get them off the couch into your place and they're
Mm-hmm.
doing something, man.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, to me, like, my biggest successes are the students that say, like, I don't have to take my antidepressants, or I was going to do something very drastic and hurt myself and I decided
Yeah.
not to, or I quit drinking or whatever it is. You know what I mean? We've had a lot of those stories from people, or, just different ways that this has kind of become my safe haven from other things in my life.
Yeah, it's tough out there for some
It
folks, you
is,
know?
man, and this is a tough community. I mean,
Mm.
Detroit has a reputation for a reason, and it's not without its struggles. And so, to be able to create a space where people can improve themselves and feel welcome in the process that's the biggest thing we can do.
Ah, man, I think that's wow. So tell me about this tribal flow class.
Yeah,
What's the
that's
hell
the
is that?
yoga class that I said my friend Tim
All
does.
right.
Yeah. Yeah, so it's actually like a like martial art inspired yoga thing. It's something he and I have been working on for years. He's a well-established yoga teacher and musician here in town, and we hit it off right away. And so we started like making music and making beats and different things that are specifically designed for martial art, right?
Mm.
And wanting a lot of what we do with Boombox comes from our collaborations. And I asked him to finally kind of put into motion this idea that we'd had of combining martial art movements with yoga and creating just a really dynamic movement practice. And
Okay.
so there's this continuous flow for about 55 minutes. It starts off with traditional yoga, which I don't know much about, and then we'll maybe go into like FMA footwork, like Escala pattern kind of stuff. We've put capoeira in there, Jenga or different kicks. We've put sumo in there. We've done things inspired by like the haka, all these different kind of cultural things, where we're taking inspiration from that and injecting that into this, so that there's this sense of kind of connecting to whatever's in there. I mean, I
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
know a lot about like ancestral stuff or whatever, but something where you walk away from that class, you really feel not just grounded in your body, but kind of connected to each other. And in that, he's a phenomenal musician, so he'll do live drumming, he'll play guitar, and then at the end, when everybody is just kind of laying in state and having like a quiet meditative moment, he'll sometimes play guitar and sing, and it's incredible. It's the people walk away from that going, I never would have thought this would exist, and I never, like, this is my favorite yoga class I've ever done. So it's a thing that's sort of unique to our group.
That sounds, I mean, it sounds incredibly unique as well as fascinating. I mean,
Yeah,
wow,
thanks.
wow. We got Maestro Master Lalo. Hey. Wow. And
Hello.
so MMA fitness, what's going on there?
Yeah, so that's a circuit training class. We're actually there's only 1 week left. We're about to take it off the schedule, but it's a circuit training class. I wanted to give, at least for a season, my students a sense of how I often like to train. And so we do usually 8 to 10 stations, heavy bags, battle ropes, box
Hmm.
jumps, kettlebells, all these different things, pad work. shadow boxing, ladder, agility ladders, all that kind of equipment training. And we just run it like a circuit. So at the beginning of the class, I hit a 2-minute timer. I just hit play, and they can kind of jump in and jump out as they want. They're on a 2 minutes on, 45-second off rotation. It's the same rotation we do for our Muay Thai kickboxing conditioning class. And it's just a mixed bag, a lot of diversity of movement, and kind of getting a sense of if you want to train like a fighter, you know what I mean? If you want to train on your own in this way, what are things you could do, And so it's just a lot of different options. It's really educational. It started off huge, and then honestly, it's become a bit of a lull in our schedule. So we're going to transition out of that. We're putting in a like an MMA conditioning class that is a lot of like shadow wrestling and BJJ mat motions, heavy bag work, pad work, that kind of thing. So basically, yeah, our kickboxing program is broken into like conditioning. I don't really care how good you look. I just want you to work hard. Our kickboxing blend, which is very technical. I want you to work hard, but I want you to focus on your quality of movement. And then what we call essentials, both for grappling and kickboxing, which is, we'll probably take one technique for the whole class and really drill down on it and make sure everything's plugged in right. And, that kind of
thing. Nice. Yeah. So what classes do you currently teach?
All of them. So there's the Monday Muay Thai conditioning class. Gentleman that trains with us, Armanok, covers that for me because my wife works on Monday nights. But I teach 4 classes on Tuesday, 3 on Wednesday, 4 on Thursday, 2 on Friday, and 3 on Saturday.
I remember I had a school, man. It just was like, and then I had we had twins, and
so do I.
I get home, and man, the looks were just like I say, I think it's time to sell it. Yeah, but I know you're talking about, man. Like you're doing 3-4 classes back to back, man. You're not eating. You're you're just moving.
And by the time I get home, I'm still kind of wired. So I do a lot of my like class development stuff. So I end up being a bit of a night owl. And yeah, we have 3 kids. We had twin girls are about to turn 7 and a 2.5-year-old son.
Oh, nice. Okay.
Yeah, and so yeah, and all 3 of them, God bless them, have different special needs, and so there's a lot of stuff that goes on in our home that requires a lot of attention. My wife is a saint, and she takes a lot of that on so that I can try to build this thing right now. But yeah, trying to find balance with that is not easy. It's really not, and it's
tough, man. And they were young. I was
how important that is.
Yeah, I wasn't seeing them going to bed, and it just was getting. It just was time. Yeah.
Yeah. I love teaching, right? I mean, even when I was still like a teenager and still learning, my friends would be like, show me something. I really loved it. I as much as I love being a student, I love teaching, and I don't really ever want to stop doing it. But I'm grateful that I'm getting to a point with my students where some of them can take over some classes. I can leave a little bit early on Wednesday. This Friday, I'm doing like another podcast, or I guess somebody else could cover it. But most of the time on Fridays, I get somebody to cover it. I can kind of dip out if I want to. That kind of thing. And where my hope is by the end of 2024 of maybe having some weekly classes where I'm not there. In the beginning, I feel a little more comfortable having my eyes on everything while we're trying to.
No, I think it's just innate. Like you have to be. You feel compelled to be there because if you're not, it's hard to just start to pull yourself away and leave.
Yeah, it's not easy to ask for help, but it's also not easy to just like hope for the best and leave and go. Like, I mean, especially after everything we went through, losing everything, I'm really precious about
it. That's another thing too. Like what you went through, you're just it's tough, man. There's definitely be a very tough transition, letting some in somebody else's hands, even though it might be just an hour.
Right. But at the same time, to your point, like, but if I'm not at home, then I also have to give away that time.
That's what I mean.
So, you got to find that balance.
Yeah, you got to get some good people in there. And not only that, just it's healthy. The Met, you know what I mean? It's just overall healthy.
Yeah, Alvin, I have the worst time delegating. The one thing I've learned in this iteration of our gym, thank God I have a team of people that are from our student body that have stepped up. So one person's helping with social media, one person's doing kind of general management, one person's doing all of our web design and our logos and stuff. And I used to do all of it, right, as most of us do. And I can't wear all those hats anymore. When my daughters were babies and there was just 2 of them and they're taking 2 2-hour naps a day, I could get a lot of work done. I can't do that now. So I'm really lucky. But to your point, Alvin, of having a hard time delegating, one thing I've learned is, yeah, I'm real bad at. I'm just kind of waiting for people to come up with a good idea.
Yeah, I know
Like, you got to
that.
ask
Right.
us for help, man. Like, I don't know how to do this.
It's hard. You know what it is? It's like for instance, after my discussion, like, in the beginning I was by myself and everything, and things got bigger. And it's tough sometimes where you gotta you gotta
Yeah.
surrender
Yes.
to asking someone to help.
Yeah.
You just got to, because
Yeah. That's
otherwise,
the perfect
man,
word.
you're gonna be miserable, man. You're gonna be
Yeah. Yeah, and it's so hard for a lot of us that, I mean, surrender is a perfect word, and it's almost like a 4-letter word for a lot of us. It's like, oh, I don't, but there's a lot of power in that. There's a lot of reclaiming
especially
things and the
the thing
willingness
is,
to do it.
you get some people they were maybe waiting to be asked, and they want
Yeah,
to step
yeah,
up and they want to help. They're just generally good people, and they want to be
yeah,
part of something and build something, and
yeah.
so.
Yeah, it makes, I always kind of chuckle of having some of these guys go like, I've always wanted to help, but if I don't know how to help, so if you don't ask, well, I can't just make up a project for you, Like, well, that's obvious. Why didn't I think of that?
Yeah. So, favorite weapon to train and why?
um, Sansabar, probably.
Zanzibar.
Yeah.
That wouldn't have anything to do with KI, would it?
Yeah, right. Yeah. Yeah, there's just something about there's like be weird about it. There's like an elegance to that blade.
Yeah.
I also like just a good straight double-edged dagger a lot. But it would be a mistake if I didn't mention palm stick. Probably if I have to pick one, I love palm stick. It is just an endless barrage of changing angles. It's,
See,
you
I'm
talk
really
about.
digging the tactical flashlight now,
Yes, exactly. Yeah, and
which
I
is
worked as a bouncer
somewhat
for a long
similar.
time,
Yeah.
so using that light as a blinder, you know
Oh
what I
my
mean.
God.
There's
Distraction? It's freaking
I've
the
used that
best.
in real world situations more than any other tool that I might carry on me,
Yeah.
And so I'm a firm believer in the flashlight, and I love teaching it. But yeah, training any of those small implements like that, especially when it's double ended, you've got some use like utility on both sides of the fist.
Yeah.
So great. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm digging it. I'm digging it. Okay, we got a question here. Question on the business side: as students start to step up and take responsibility. All, in parentheses, most students start out as paying students. When you start to delegate teaching opportunities to them, how does that affect their tuition? If someone helps with marketing or social media, do you waive their per class fees?
Yeah, it's a good question. We do case by case. There's some
Mhm.
people where we're on like a partial trade. I've been really, really blessed with this. I've had a handful of people go, I don't want anything. I just want to help. I just kind of believe in what we're doing here, and I want it to be successful. This is good for the community. This is my professional skill set. Whenever I have time, I'll work on the back end of the business and with this project or that project. So that's been amazing. Then there's a couple people that are on maybe a partial trade, and then one or two people who do a bunch of work, who basically are willing to take on not quite a full-time job, but a lot of time out of their day for me. And so they're on more like a full trade. And I
Yeah,
like,
you gotta
one of the
go.
great things about this is a marketable skill. I mean, I have for example, I have a lot of tattoos all over, and half, if not the majority of them, were done on trade. It's really, I like that kind of interaction. It doesn't make you can't trade everything away because you won't be able to pay your bills. But if there's some sort of additional service that you think would be beneficial to the business or just to you as an individual, I love that this is a service we can provide somebody else.
Yeah.
That pretty often people are like, oh, that sounds cool. Okay, I'll do
No
that.
there's nothing wrong with bartering. Are you kidding
Yeah,
me?
man. Yeah, I love it. It's a great thing to have in that regard. And people tend to think martial arts kind of cool, or kickboxing sounds like it'd be good for them, or so it's worked for us.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, what do you got for future goals for yourself, school? Where are they?
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to see this continue growing and expanding. I'd like to get to the point where maybe we're like the space of 2,000 square feet. I'd like to be about 4, maybe stop there. I don't want it too big, and then it's, you're never going to stop working. But for it to really be comfortably self-sustaining. It'd be nice to make a couple bucks actually, but for the gym to be self-sustaining, it's super important to me that we continue to do good work in the community, and that's not just lip service, and that's our whole thing. And so, finding new ways to branch out into the community and bringing this practice. Detroit is a place where it has notoriously terrible public transportation. And so if you have people with low-income families and there's no public transportation, even if you're offering a good deal, they can't get to you. So trying to set up satellite programs in different parts of the community where people can access this, because I do think the ripple effects of it would be profound. So trying to do more of that.
Do that.
Yeah. I'd like to do that. We've got some opportunities to be working with some other groups and opening up like sister schools or satellite programs in other part of the state throughout this year. So that's exciting. That's a very new thing for us. To this point, I really love podcasting. I used to have a show with the Walma Group, World of Martial Art, and with Mick Tolley and Nathan Leverton, and I was they're all in the UK, and so I was like their token American. And we did that show for about a year and a half, and I loved it, fell in love with the process. So we have an office in our gym that I'm working on right now, converting into a podcast studio. And so I've got a couple local show ideas I want to do, both martial art and non-martial art related, but then we're going to make that studio available to people in the community to do their own new show startups, that kind of thing.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. And we've got like some music video shoots coming up in our gym. They're going to be utilized for that, which is really cool. And we're trying to work more with local video producers and film producers, that kind of stuff. So we've done a little bit of fight choreography for small film projects and for music videos. And so we're looking to do more of that. But, this is one of those things that, I have good friends and training partners that are now like very high level stunt actors. And, one of them is Ben Affleck's stunt double and is, doing these amazing things. And, these people are traveling here and teaching there. And there's so many ways that you can utilize this practice in your life, not just to benefit yourself, but like have, I don't know, for want of a better word, like adventures, people really going out and doing cool things. And so, I love seminar teaching because I love to travel and meet new people and try new things. And so I've been enjoying the bit of traveling. I occasionally teach in the South, different schools down there, particularly in Baton Rouge. And so doing more of that would be fun just because it's a joy to do that. But most of our focus right now is on the community here locally and trying to do good work. So
sounds like you're doing great things.
Thanks.
Especially in a place where, it's been already, got existing issues and poverty and et cetera. And, so.
Yeah. It's, like we said off air, Detroit gets a worse rep than it deserves, but it has a rep for a reason. And it is a extremely determined, and I use the word gritty in a positive way. The way I like to describe Detroit is it's a city where like the whole world's got its boot on Detroit's neck and Detroit just smiles back up at it. Like it's really hard to keep this place down. The Lions are like a big frenzy right now because there's some
look at them, man.
So there's something really romantic about being here right now, and it's pretty exciting. So I love it here. This place just moves different than other places. And there's some dangerous spots, but this community looks after itself, and if you're a part of it and you want to do good things, it takes you in a really kind of familial way, and it's pretty cool.
Nice.
So, yeah, we're lucky for that.
Awesome. Hey man, it's been a pleasure having you on. I'm glad I saw you. I forgot where I got that. I don't know. Must have saw something that triggered. Hey man, that'd be a good guy to get on the show. That'd be something, but whatever it was good. So
yeah, well, this is a real honor to be on. This is the one show where I was like telling my wife and everybody like, holy God, I'm gonna be on FMA discussion. So that's pretty cool. I really appreciate it.
I'm just like I never think this is anything like really big. It's just like,
well,
people are like, no, you don't understand what you're doing. You're creating a library and this and that. I'm like, I just talk to people.
For us, it's a big deal, and for me, it's a big deal. So, and that's not just lip service. I really do appreciate it. And Mike, I see you, by the way. Motor City Machete is the coolest name of all time. Thank you for that. But yeah, it's a pleasure. I appreciate it, and
Oh
finally
yeah.
chat with you and get to know you. You know, we message a little bit because of KI and stuff, but this is awesome. Thanks.
Yeah, right. We're both in yeah, we got the group there with Burton, so
Yep. Yeah.
which I gotta try to frequent more, but
Yeah. Likewise.
everything else going on. But hey man, well I'll see you in the group, so it's not like we're gonna be strangers
For
in
sure.
there. So you take care of yourself. You're doing
You
great
too.
things. I
Thanks
hope,
so much.
good things happen to good people, man. So stick it
Yeah.
out, man.
Keep trying to be in that good people category, and we'll see what happens.
Well, I think you're doing it. So,
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Thank you.
you take care,
All
man.
right, you too, sir. Thanks so much. Bye, everybody. Thank
All
you.
right.
All right.
Bye bye. And that wraps up 459, 460. Yes, Friday, 2 o'clock. Piper. Yeah. So we're going to be talking to founder Nigel February, who I've been talking to as of late, and I'm really hoping this will be a remedy, if you will, on kind of, I don't want to say opposing factions. I don't think that's fair, but factions nonetheless. And those of you who are in the Piper world, you might have some understanding, what's been going on, you know, one person leaving and, me kind of having to pick up the pieces and all that. And yeah, so I don't want to give too much away because it's not, my goal here is not to get political, but rather I'm hoping this is going to really be a positive aspect that comes out of Friday. I really do hope that. And this is going to be the start, and you have to start somewhere, right? So, yeah. So, anyway, but back to the original point, episode 460, Friday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Nigel February, founder of Piper. And we had the test run and just some interesting history that I wasn't aware of. It was really kind of fascinating, particularly with the Malays coming over to South Africa at a very earlier date than I thought. And that was quite fascinating. And just that whole sea lot influence on Piper, which to me, I always thought was more prevalent than, I was initially told. Now I'm convinced of it. So, but yeah, but if you got nothing going on, check out Friday, 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Should be interesting. I hope so. And I hope it leads to bigger and better things and hopefully us working together. That, I hope that's what can come out of this. Yeah. So, but anyway, thanks to you all that jumped in. Raffle. I'm going to keep bringing this up to, so you guys get sick of it. We are going to be able to help folks that are sick, masters. So we just gave some money to Nene Tortal. Almost escaped me. So, however, though, there were a few others that were sick. So instead of dividing like a little here, a little there, I just kind of decided to send all them to GM Nene. But there's still some others out there. So I finally, okay, time to do a raffle. So the raffle is going to be taking place, I believe, March 17th, which is on a Sunday. The flyers will be coming out very shortly, and I think the tickets are going to be $5. Now, in FA discussion, you're going to see a pin. There's a bunch of items already there, populated in the comment section. There's some free offerings, Zoom classes. I think there's a stick bag. There's a DVD. Yeah, a bunch of stuff. So, yeah, a couple things of how you can help. A, well, buy tickets so we can send money over there. Two, if you have something you want to donate, maybe you got an old weapon hanging around that you've been looking at for 5 years and it's collecting dust. Maybe you got a book or whatever it may be. Matter of fact, I'm going to be donating lessons, but I just remembered since I brought up the name book, I have an extra book of something which I'm going to be donating as well. So let us know. This is going to a really good cause. Again, kind of some older masters that are sickly and all that, and Billy Brown's wife as well. Yeah, I kind of got a list. It's not in front of me yet. Those who are going to be we're going to be donating money to. So check that out. If you can help us out, we much appreciate it. As always, we do the raffles live. You check them out. You see which ticket you buy. You see what you hopefully will win. And if you don't win anything, again, you're helping somebody. You know what I mean? So look at it that way. All right. All right. So hopefully I'll see you guys at 2 p.m. Friday. If not, have a good night.